Okay, I just want to start off with this interview saying this is Ty Johnson. I'm here with Dennis Mottl at Palmer High School. To start it off, Dennis, where is your birthplace at?
I was born at Ord, Nebraska. My family originally were farmers and ranchers.
What was your father's name?
My father's name was John Robert Mottl.
And your mother's?
My mother's name was Veronica Marie, of course, Mottl.
Do you have any siblings?
I have a brother who is about 14 years younger than I. He is a firefighter in Grand Island. I had a sister who passed away when she was 19.
For your family origins, like just the thing you guys kind of did on the side, kind of traditions, what was that?
In fact, almost all of our traditions were based around family kinds of activities. Catholic Church was a big part of what we did, and through it we had a lot of activities that were not just faith-based but family-based. Hobbies, I used to go hunting and fishing, a little bit camping. Kind of gave those things up as I got older.
So what did you do as a child, mainly in your youth and teenage years?
Youth, I thought it was just really the best kind of fun to go visit cousins, and we would just do kid things, everything from play with farm toys in the dirt and run around, climb trees, just go places together and enjoy each other's company.
What else? We're not going to do that one. So what were your chores growing up?
A lot of my chores growing up were household kinds of chores, some things like carry out the garbage, mow the lawn, but additionally some farm chores. And I grew up on the farm ranch when I was pretty young. I really took a lot of pride in being able to help with livestock chores, and that included everything from milking cows, taking care of pigs, cutting weeds, helping to fix fence, a little bit of driving tractor, a little bit actually, because of my age, we were in an area where we were late in the switch over from using horses to using tractors, and so I had horse-related activities, including riding horses and driving a team of horses.
Were you ever married, and if so, what was the date and who did you marry?
I am presently married. I will have been married 45 years in May, got married in 1971. I married a young lady named Barbara Hartman. She is a high school classmate and farm girl from south of Omaha, between Omaha and Papillion.
And how did you guys meet?
Like I said, we were high school classmates. Her brother was one of my best friends, and so she was just kind of always a little bit of a part of the picture.
Did you guys ever have children?
We do. We have 3 grown children, all 3 of whom are married. Our oldest son, his name is DJ. He is married, has 4 children. He lives at North Bend, Nebraska. He's a high school agriculture teacher and farmer and entrepreneurial business owner. Second son is Matthew. He is married, lives at Palmer, Nebraska, also has 4 children, and he is employed in agribusiness in Grand Island, but also has a cow herd. Have a daughter, her name is Deanna, and she is married. Her last name is Finke. Her husband Adam works for Grow Right Minerals. Works for farming operation at Gothenburg. My daughter is in hospital administration at Gothenburg.
Okay. Beginning of the war, we'll start talking that part of it. What were you doing prior to the war starting or prior to your awareness of the war?
I really became aware of the war in grade school. I used to watch it on TV, and I knew that was a bad thing. My dad had been in World War II, and although he didn't talk about it very much, I knew war was a really terrible thing. I watched it on TV, and as a grade schooler, I thought, wow, that's bad, but, I'm just 12 years old, 13 years old. This will be done by the time I am old enough to be involved, to go in the service. In high school, it was still going on. But again, I kind of told myself not to worry because it'll be over before I'm old enough to become involved. Well, it wasn't, but again, not to worry because, see, I'm going to go to college, and I will have college deferment, which I did do. But quite honestly, I was not a good college student. My mind wasn't in the right place. It wasn't college. It was me. The instructors were fine. The classes were fine. But I just wasn't settled down and had a restless demeanor about myself. As a result, I dropped out of college and I joined the Marines. And at the time of joining, I was 19 years old, I guess I was, is what I was. And did I want to join? Well, I felt it was more of an obligation than I did anything else. And some of my friends were already in the military, though none of them that happened to be in the military were in college at the time that I was. And ironically, there were about 5 of us, 6 of us, including myself, that hung around together. Of the other 5, sad to say, 4 of those 5 were killed in Vietnam. And one of whom was missing in action for a fairly lengthy time before they did find his body. But that was a little unsettling. And so I joined the Marines.
Okay. You covered over did you want to join the Army by
Marines.
which you went to the Marines, I should say. I'm sorry.
Oh, you should be sorry. That's a terrible mistake. I'm one of those.
And you said you felt as obligation.
I did.
How did you learn about or receive information about the war? You said you watched TV when you were younger, but
TV, radio, newspaper. I'm an avid newspaper reader. I always have been. I listened to some people who had come back from Vietnam, and so I learned about the war that way.
did that change your perspective at all on it?
No, I don't think it changed my perspective because I always felt like this would be a terrible thing to happen, but unless somebody steps up, well, that's just not the right thing to do. And
Call the office. Joni, please call the office.
I read about people who were draft dodgers or who maybe made the choice to go to Canada to avoid serving in Vietnam, and that just really upset me. although I wasn't vocal about that, it just was not something I would ever at all have been able to do. Wouldn't have been happy with myself.
What was your understanding of why the U.S. was involved in Vietnam?
My understanding was that Vietnam was a place that America and many other countries, the United States and many other countries, were going to take a stand against communism. The domino theory was in place, and that is that if South Vietnam fell, then all of the other countries in the Pacific Rim area, many of whom were our friends and allies, example Thailand, Finland, even perhaps Australia, some of the Pacific Rim countries would also fall to communism, and that just wasn't what I was willing to accept.
Just adding on that, do you think anything had to do with economic parts of how we were struggling as a nation at that time?
Well, unfortunately, war is probably good for an economy. It generates jobs, albeit for the purpose of maybe manufacturing anything and everything from bombs to bombers and all kinds of military vehicles, including boats and ships. And so I guess from that standpoint, yeah, it was an economic kind of a thing. But I don't think that there was anybody within the U.S. economy per se who was wishing for the war to continue so that their personal economic situation would improve. I don't think that was it.
Okay.
It was good for the economy in some ways, but not good for us as a country. War never is.
Okay. Would you describe the atmosphere of the people were feeling during the war, particularly in the beginning?
I can't really remember what people felt like in the beginning, not too specifically anyway, but it didn't take long for people who were sending troops to Vietnam to see demonstrations happening that were, of course, anti-war, anti-Vietnam War specifically. A lot of people against it. I don't remember that there was anybody who joined a demonstration for the war, but I do remember people supporting the individuals who were involved with being in Vietnam or who were in the military. I remember people supporting us that way. I personally, and I know that there were anti-war activists. I personally didn't have contact with any of those people.
Okay, and that was mainly just kind of out in California, mainly all the doves, as they call them. And
yeah, although I guess I did have a instructor in college, a graduate student. She was a lab instructor, actually for a speech class. And she was a member of, and she told us with great deal of enthusiasm and vigor and conviction that she was a member of SDS, which is Students for Democratic Society, who had their place. They were very entrenched against the war, and she would, in class, badmouth military, American military personnel who were in Vietnam. She didn't last as an instructor because she was just plain radical. Mm-hmm. I think she lost her job as a lab instructor halfway through the semester or something.
Really? Okay. Moving on to the middle part of the war. Describe the day you actually left for war.
Well, I can remember the day I left for Vietnam. It was June 28th, 1970. And that day was particularly memorable because I was in the Marines. I was at Camp Pendleton, California. I was waiting to go to Officers Candidate School. Although I was enlisted, I was selected to be one of those candidates. And I had an interview to go to Quantico, to Officers Candidate School. And after the interview, I called my fiance. We were engaged. I was engaged at the time, and told her that I would need to go to Quantico for, something just short of 2 years. And then I would have to serve, I think it was 6 more years after that. So we discussed that and decided together that no, I would not go to Officers Candidate School. I would do my time as an enlisted Marine and then get out and that kind of thing. But I knew I had a little bit of leave time available to me that I had not taken at that point in time. And so we decided, after some visiting back and forth over the telephone, that we would get married on June 28th. Well, guess what? June 28th, they gave me orders to leave for Vietnam. So, needless to say, did not get married. June 28th. And, well, I can't say that it was a real happy day. I didn't do cartwheels over it because from the very start, boot camp, we were told, you're going to Vietnam. It's what Marines do. And you're going to Vietnam and you're going to fight.
Okay, tell me about your experiences during the Vietnam War. What did you do during the war?
Oh boy. I was infantry, which means I was going to carry a rifle. I was going to go out on patrols in rice paddy and jungles and triple canopy jungles, and that is what we did. A lot of times we went out in squad-sized groups, which is supposed to be 12 Marines, but usually it was 6 or maybe 8, and it was pretty scary. I won't say much of the time, I will say most of the time. Very quickly I was asked if I would be a radio operator in the squad, and I was actually convinced to do so. I didn't want to carry the extra weight of the radios, but I was convinced because one of the guys said, well, an advantage of that is that when the fighting starts, you just put your head down and get on the radio. Well, that idea of put your head down and get on the radio and take care of communications appealed to me a great deal for, I hope, the obvious reasons. But that didn't last long because pretty soon I became a platoon radio operator, and then within a couple of months I ended up as the company radio operator, which involved a lot bigger set of responsibilities as far as communication, and you're kind of always putting yourself out there right at the front of whatever is happening with your company commander, whom, by the way, who I saw get killed when Viet Cong jumped up out of a spider hole. I was talking on the radio. We were in the middle of an ambush, and this man jumped up out of a spider hole and shot him in the back 7 times. I did not realize what had happened until I turned around and saw my company commander falling down, and this Viet Cong just kind of going over the edge of a bank into the brush and trees. I didn't have a chance to react, and I'm sure that had I been a little closer to my company commander, like so often I was that I would have also been killed. But following his orders, he told me to get underneath of a set of kind of rock overhang during this ambush and call for air support or let battalion headquarters know that we were in a big fight. My job was communication, but I also went out on patrols. We went out into the jungle, set up listening posts. As such, also ended up the victim of sniper fire, or recipient, I should say, of sniper fire, booby traps, small ambushes, a lot of hit and go kinds of activity from Viet Cong or North Vietnamese Army regulars. And I should say that we were, I was with India Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. We were positioned at the mouth of what they called the Quai San Pass. And the Quai San Pass was a break in the mountains, the hills, adjacent or very close to Laos and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. There were troops and munitions and equipment going up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They were funneling these items and these other people into South Vietnam to fight through that Ho Chi Minh Trail. The troops that were coming from the North Vietnamese Army regulars, they were well trained, they were well armed, they wanted to fight, they had a lot of energy, they weren't all used up, and they wanted to kill people. And especially they wanted to kill Americans, and they did. And to that end, just real quickly, I will say that I was in country 2 weeks, and we were hit one night in a platoon size position. We were dug in, and there were 31 Marines. The next morning there were 17 Marines that were either dead or wounded. That was a pretty rude awakening. With that being the case, I've got 50 weeks to go, because you serve a year, which is 52 weeks. But if I'd been there 2 weeks and half my platoon was killed, it doesn't take very much mathematics to arrive at the conclusion that you're going to get killed too. And we did have a lot of Marines were killed in the time that I was there from a variety of reasons. Sniper fire, firefights, booby traps, all kinds of things.
Okay. About your friends that went to war as well. I know you mentioned the ones earlier in the interview. The one also that went IMA. Do you know what part of, like, were they in the Army, Marines? What part of the...
Both of those happened to be in the Army. I think they were both stationed in the Central Highlands area of Vietnam.
Okay. How did you communicate with the people while you were at war?
Well, I communicated with other Marines via radio because I was a radio operator. But now that doesn't mean that you can just have chit-chat. That it wasn't that way, not at all, never. Communicate with people.
Let me restate that a little bit better. How did you communicate with people at home while you're at war?
Letters. Phone calls, never. I mean, that just didn't exist. And that's a good question because just a quick little story. When I started teaching here at Palmer, I had a young man ask me one day after they realized I'd been in Vietnam. He asked me, Well, what did you do for fun on your days off? There were no days off. Fun, there was nothing about that. Nothing. Zero. Nothing that was fun. Fun was a quiet part of a night's sleep because you always had to stand foxhole duty somewhere. We did have this game where because we were in a lot of water, you would have leeches attached to the part of your leg just above your boot line. And just within the squad I was in, we had this little game we played, morbid as it might be, to see who could grow the biggest leech. I never won. I had a good one going one time, and the little devil went AWOL. He just dropped off somewhere. It was nothing fun, and had you been able to communicate, that would have been great. Now, there was such a thing as an R&R. I passed up an R&R to Australia because where we were up on top of a fire support base named LZ Ryder, the fog was so thick, and I'd seen one or two helicopter crashes that they were really ugly. I just don't want to be a part of that, so I thought, you know what, I'll just sit tight. Right here where I'm at, I'm surrounded by really well-trained Marines. I don't think I need to take the chance of going to Australia and get on a helicopter in some really bad and unpredictable weather. I wasn't that crazy about an R&R anyhow.
Okay. How were soldiers treated, and did you guys get proper care while you were over there?
I felt like we got really good care. Tremendous support from within the Marine Corps. And we didn't have contact with anybody else. We had contact a little bit with some civilians, and by and large, they treated us good. Although I know that some of the civilians, and in fact, some of whom were actually on base with us, had leanings towards the Viet Cong. Example, we've found out that the Vietnamese man who came onto the base to give haircuts to Marines, he actually was a Viet Cong. And to think, that he had a razor and shaved my whiskers off, and that thing was sharp as anything in the world, and he was in fact a Viet Cong sympathizer. But we got good care. We got good care in terms of how we were fed. We got good care in terms of anything medical that we needed, and I did get medevaced for immersion foot. I got good training. I felt respected. I felt like I was doing my duty. I can't complain about that aspect of being involved in the Vietnam War. Not at all.
And did you know what your family was doing during the war?
Yes. They were home working or going to school.
That's including all your siblings and your mother and father?
Well, yeah, my mom and dad were working. Siblings, I had a younger brother. He was in grade school or kindergarten or somewhere in there. He was 14 years younger than I was, so he'd been 5 or 6 years old. My sister, she graduated from high school, and she got a job.
Did it affect you pretty hard having to leave them?
Probably as hard as anything, yes. Yeah, I really missed my family. And to this day, I have the understanding and appreciation for the love that a family provides to you. My mom and dad have since passed away, and as I said, I had a sister who passed away when she was 19. My brother is alive. He is also a former Marine, and I don't have to talk to him about what it's like to be a Marine. He did not go to Vietnam. He did not have any overseas deployment at all, but he knows. There's a sense between us as Marines as about what it was like. He's a kind of a big buff on Marine history, and there's a tremendous pride between on the part of both of us that we're Marines, not Army, not Navy, not Coast Guard, not Air Force. We're Marines.
Okay. Getting back to like part of your family, how did they react when you actually went to Vietnam? Did you know?
Oh yeah. My dad was pretty quiet, but he'd been in World War II, and again there was kind of an understanding there about just how much danger I was going to be in. My sister cried. My mom was hysterical. And she brought up the fact, she says, well, you're going into the Marines. And she's just bawling uncontrollably. And one of the statements that she made was, you're going to the Marines, not the Army. They kill Marines. So she had a little bit more understanding of the fact that I think Marines are probably going to be at the tip of the spear wherever there is danger.
Then back to when you were in Vietnam, were you familiar with Agent Orange?
I was in Agent Orange.
Yes. Was it were a lot of your how should I say it? Some of your members of your troop, I apologize if I'm not saying that right.
Okay.
Were any of them affected by any of that being sprayed down?
Yes. I had two close friends. Well, many close friends, but okay. Let me say, Agent Orange. Okay. We had helicopters fly Agent Orange onto a strip of jungle one time, and they came streaking across the sky. I guess that's a fair way. The rotors, the propellers, as this was just being dumped out straight on the jungle below, the wind from the propellers just disseminated that over a pretty wide area. And I can remember seeing them go across this piece of valley, small river valley, and they dumped a path of 245T, Agent Orange, probably 300, 400 feet wide. I wasn't underneath the mist or anything. I was watching this from some distance away. We walked through it, I'm going to say 30 days later, and everything was dead. We walked through it because we lit it on fire, and we burned a strip. And then we just let it burn. And I don't know, a couple weeks later, 2 more companies of Marines were dropped along a ridge top, and then they swept towards this burned area. The idea there was to create a kill zone. Anybody that ran across that, of course, they would be unprotected and unable to hide in the jungle because the jungle was burned to nothing. And they got some kills out of flushing enemy combatants out of the jungle as they were sweeping through. And And I can't say that I remember what happened as far as where we were at. I know I really didn't see anything. We did have one other guy, happened to be the only other guy I knew from Nebraska. He got shot in the leg somewhere along the line by either a sniper or somebody who made a dash across that kill zone. I can't remember that. But that was my contact, actually, with Agent Orange. However, I had two good friends. One of them was Dwayne Kreitzer. He's from Colorado. Another one, Ron Shappett. He was from Connecticut. He was my assistant company radio operator. And we kept in touch. But there was a gap there of about 3-4 years, and I didn't hear from him. And I had called him and didn't left messages, but didn't hear anything back from him. Finally, he calls, and I thought, well, maybe he got sick, maybe he died. I just didn't know. He calls, and he says to me, he says, I've been sick. Oh, what's up? And he says, I have a form of cancer that they believe is related to Agent Orange. Whoa, bummer. And so this went on for a few more years, and he's fighting it pretty hard. In 2006, we went to the East Coast in the fall. We stopped to see him, and it was wonderful. We hugged and just shed tears. I mean, right there holding each other, just kind of bawling like a pair of babies because of what we had shared. And for me, because of, well, and probably him too, knew what was going on with regard to his health issues. He eventually shared with me that they didn't give him long to live. They've been doing everything they could, but nothing seems to be stopping the disease. And I was in South Dakota. After I left teaching. I retired from teaching. Then for 6 years I was doing something else. And I was driving in South Dakota and job-related, and my cell phone rings, and this young lady introduced herself. Excuse me. I didn't recognize her voice or last name, anything, and she said, I am Ron Shappett's daughter. And I pulled my truck over as fast as I could because I pretty well knew what she was going to say, and she did. She said that Ron died last night, and that he wanted her to call me to let me know when he died. And that's what she did. I hung up and I just sat there probably for 10 minutes, and I just bawled. I just cried. I had to let some of that crap out. I know somebody who was affected by Agent Orange.
Okay. We're 39 minutes in, and it's 4:51. We're going to take a break right now. Getting back into the interview, we have, if you could explain the war in one word, what would it be? And can you elaborate on why you chose this word?
Okay, it says, if you could explain it in one word. I can't. Because there's so many things that impacted on me emotionally and physically. I gave a piece of my youth to the war in Vietnam. I gave that. But I think in a sense I also received in return a greater passion for life, an appreciation for other people, all kinds of people, even the enemy. I knew how terrible this was for my mom and dad, my sister, my fiance. I knew that. I could sense that in their letters and everything like that. But when we killed someone over there, you'd have to go through their backpack or their belongings. Of course, you tied a cord around them, and this seems very harsh. Tied a cord around them, and you drug their dead, lifeless, mutilated perhaps body 10 or 15 feet. Try to roll them over because you didn't want them to have booby-trapped themselves, so when you walk up to them that it ends up costing you injury or your life. But we'd search these bodies, and we'd find billfolds or backpacks. And one young man one time who had been hit by a rifle round, just kind of behind his ear, and it took half of his face off. It was just a terrible thing to see. And then searching his pack, we found a picture of, I assume it was him, and a young lady and 2 small children. And so the toll was terrible, bad, both ways. There's some movies I have seen that depict war in some really, really realistic ways. There's an old movie called Platoon. It shook me up pretty bad. Saving Private Ryan. Excuse me. Was a little hard for me to see. There were a couple of other Vietnam movies that were pretty bad. I Was a Soldier once. I don't need to see those again. They were too realistic. They brought back really bad memories. Just memories I couldn't get rid of.
Okay.
But as terrible as those movies were, nothing compares to the real thing. When the noise around you, the screaming from wounded Marines, rifle fire, incoming mortars, rocket-propelled grenades, the report from cannons, our cannons aimed at the enemy, and fighting from a foxhole so that you don't get overrun, because the enemy is right out there, less than a stone's throw away. And to the point where, once for sure, if I had been asked at that moment in time, if from 20 minutes from now, will I be alive, I would have answered no. I had a heat grenade set on the radios on my pack, because when we were going to be overrun, and we were going to, I was going to set that heat grenade off to melt my radios. I also had taken, we were about out of ammunition. I had taken 1 round and transferred from a full clip to an empty clip, 1 round, and I had set it down conveniently to my side, as did several of the other Marines in my squad, because when we were going to be overrun, they weren't going to take me prisoner. They were not going to have a live body. I was just absolutely refused to be somebody's trophy. Wasn't going to happen.
Okay. Can you remember what the food was like from the beginning to the end of the time you were there?
Yeah, we had sea rations. They came in a little box, I don't know, 3 inches by 6 inches by 8 inches, sea rations. Everything you needed to eat. Maybe it didn't physically make you full, but it had everything you needed to eat. Some were better than others. And there was everything: scrambled eggs and ham, green scrambled eggs and ham, but it tasted kind of like scrambled eggs and ham. You ate it and you didn't complain. There was one beef steak. That was pretty good. It was really salty, but you needed a lot of salt to replenish the salt that was in your body. There was some others. There was roast pork. There was spaghetti. There was a variety. They were all okay. Mm-hmm. When we got back to a base, and I was stationed most of the time off of a fire support base called Landing Zone, or LZ Ross. And when we got back into LZ Ross occasionally, and I would say that was maybe 2 days, 3 days out of every month and a half or so. Otherwise, we were in the jungle the whole time, on patrols and setting up positions where we could operate from, digging in and then running patrols. But when we got back into base, they would have, I remember, New York strip steaks for us, and baked potatoes and salad. And the guys who were there in the kitchen at the cook shack, they did a really good job of trying to make a special meal or two for us, because they knew that we were just getting sea rations. Those were really, really good, and we all looked forward to that. Other than, 2 days was about enough, because you wanted to get back out in the jungle. That's what you were trained to do. That's what you felt most comfortable doing. Back on LZ Ross, if you were walking along a little street or a little road. Now, this is not a big base. This is a base about, 1.5 city blocks square. So they're small. But you had to salute officers. You had to extend those kinds of courtesies. Whereas out in the bush, in the jungle, that is, everybody knew their job, and they did it. The guys talked about, like, when you were back at LZ Ross, you got messed with. And those formalities, while they were a good thing stateside, they were not something that the grunts, the Marine infantry guys, called them very proudly. They called themselves jarhead grunts, ground pounders. They didn't want that. They didn't want to have any part of that. Their job was one that they were more comfortable out in the jungle.
Okay. I know you've told me very numerous great stories so far. Can you tell me about a specific experience from the Vietnam War era that you can't forget, or your most vivid memory of the time period?
Yeah, I can give you one that probably started my Vietnam experience off with it that really, in a very hard, harsh way, drove home just kind of what things might be like. It goes back to that time when I was in Vietnam, about 2 weeks, and we went into this free fire zone, 31 Marines. And we got hit the second night we were in there. We were dug in pretty good, but we got hit hard. And the Viet Cong and the NVA, and I think it was both, North Vietnamese Army Regulars, NVA. And I say that because they had machine guns. They had rocket-propelled grenades, RPGs. There were a lot of them. And they didn't use their bullets carefully. They fired a lot of rounds at us, thousands of rounds. We got hit really hard, and I knew we were set up in a perimeter in foxholes, and we had guys getting hit. And there was a young man across the perimeter from where I was dug in with another Marine, 2-man fighting hole. That's what they called it. This young man had been hit, and he's screaming. I've been hit. Send a corpsman, meaning a Navy corpsman, who's the closest thing to a doctor that we would have had there. And they were wonderful. Navy corpsmen were amazing people. But he's screaming, I've been hit, send a corpsman. And he's just delirious in the way he's screaming. Loud with everything that he's got, all the energy that he's got left in his body. He's screaming for this Navy corpsman. And sometimes just screaming, not any word, just screaming out of pain. And this is going on for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And somebody else yells, "Shut up, he's dead." That drove it home pretty hard. And I remember that young man. I remember his screaming. But I also remember when he quit screaming and you knew what had happened. We had a low ceiling that night. The clouds were about 60, 70, maybe 80 feet in the air. We couldn't get any helicopter gunship support. It was so totally dark underneath those clouds. And this was in, this would have been late July or maybe first week or so of August. And we were just there. I did not know it. The bulk of, 31 Marines the next morning, 17 were dead or wounded. The other 14, we did not really know what kind of shape the other side of our perimeter was. But pretty much everybody on the other side of the perimeter, that other half circle of our perimeter, if you will, they were pretty much all dead or incapable of fighting. And we kind of had our back to the enemy, so to speak. And I just absolutely know for sure that if they would have known that we were in that bad a shape, they would have overrun us right then and there. And that didn't happen. There was a young man named Tony Barba, and somehow he made his way to the other side of that perimeter, and he got a machine gun, and he's putting machine gun fire back out across this dry rice paddy area into that tree line. But he was about the only one on that side of the perimeter who was making any return fire. And like I said, "Shut up, he's dead," kind of told the whole story aside from the fact that you knew what happened when he quit screaming.
Yeah, that's a very, very hard story to even listen to be honest with you. Once the war was over, did life return to normal, or were things permanently changed for you?
I was changed. I don't think in any bad ways. I am terribly proud to have served, and I consider it an opportunity. I'm glad it happened once. Boy, I wouldn't want to go through that again. I'm 67 years old. I couldn't go through that again. At the time, however, I was extremely physically fit. I like to think I was intelligent. I had a really good attitude with regard to the mission that we were there to complete, as well as the mission that we were in charge of every day, whether that just be a patrol or sitting somewhere at a listening post, going out on a night ambush, serving as a radio operator. I served as a spotter for artillery for Phantom jets, and I called in airstrikes for us. I called in artillery strikes with the help of other people, but I could read a map really well. I think I was regarded very highly as a very adept Marine. And as such, I did receive 2 promotions related to combat activity, and I'm proud of that. I was changed. The United States, or we called it there, the world. The world, when I came back to it, that is the United States. It was the same, but different, because I just didn't view things the same way. Many more appreciations for simple things in life. No grudges. Proud to have been able to serve. Proud to have been a Marine. Want to do it all over again? Marine, yes. Vietnam War, no.
Okay, that kind of takes care of that next question. If you had the chance to never go to war, would you take it? So,
let me address that. If you got a chance to go to war, would you take it?
If you got a chance to never go to war, would you take it? So, I mean,
I had that chance. I could have went to Canada.
That you're right.
No, I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't do it. I would rather be dead there than alive in Canada.
That's a good way to put it, I think, from how proud you are, which I think we all can thank you. Did the war make you appreciate your family and your life at home more?
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%, yes. Just everything and everybody about the United States, and peace and quiet and absence of danger. Yeah.
Okay. Was it hard to get back in your everyday routine after you returned home from war?
Not really. I had a very, very strong support group in my family, as well as former employers, and a big extended family as well. And so everybody was kind of very quick to step up and say, okay, how can we help you get back to a normal routine, whatever that is. And my normal routine was going to be, that is, after I got out of service, was going to be to go to college and finish my college degree, my bachelor's degree.
And I know you said in the beginning there wasn't hardly any anti-war people around. In your area, was there when you got back, or you just stayed with people that were super supportive?
I don't remember. Nebraska was pretty quiet with regard to anti-war protesters compared to other areas. Were they around? Yeah. But I didn't come face to face with any of them. I didn't feel intimidated or threatened by them popping up anywhere and giving me a rash of crap. And having just come back from Vietnam and having done what I did, and if somebody would have given me a really bad time about something, I don't think I would have had too much hesitation about wading right into the middle of them.
Okay. What do you think we could have done differently, opposed to what we did for the war?
We could have done differently.
As
Wow.
a nation. I mean, big question.
I think we had some of the people who were supposed to be the decision makers. And I think General Westmoreland was a name that I can recall. Some of these people were a little bit detached from the war and the South Vietnamese population. And I think on their part, maybe had they had a little bit better insight, they maybe could have made better decisions. I know personally, as I think back, there's a few things that I could have done differently that probably would have saved, in a couple of cases, a guy's life. Just something as simple as, don't stand up right now because there is a sniper and he is going to shoot you if you stand up. He stood up and he did shoot him and he did kill him. We got ambushed one time. I took a radio call from this good friend of mine who was in Colorado, and he sensed that something was not right just before this ambush happened, and he called me to have me ask my company commander if he could send his squad off the trail that we were on into the jungle a little bit and just see what's in there ahead of us, to see if we weren't getting into a bad situation. I relayed that call to I relayed that message, that request, to my company commander, who was a captain. The squad leader was a corporal. The captain said no, but I sensed he had hesitancy in his no, and I should have said, Captain, I think that would be a wise idea that you let Corporal Kreitzer do that. He's very knowledgeable. Whereas at that time, our company commander was not. I would have done that differently. I should have spoke up. And it haunts me yet a little bit today. I met some of the most dedicated people I've ever met in my life as Marines in Vietnam. Good people. And they were white, black, red, yellow, every race and creed, color, ethnic background as you can imagine, and wonderful people, and totally dedicated.
Okay, what lessons did you learn that you'd want others to remember about this time in history?
You know, I think if we don't listen, if somebody maybe like myself, doesn't speak up, unfortunately, history tends to repeat itself, maybe for those reasons. Nobody ever spoke up. I think there's been a lot in print about the Vietnam War. Read it. Try to maybe personally establish some real sense of what these young men gave of themselves to serve in the Vietnam War. And now we've got young men, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places in the world, bet on it, who are there as representatives of our country, either in the military, or maybe not in the military, but as mercenary types of individuals. They're there. I know they're there because I had encounters with those kinds of individuals in Vietnam who, they were not Army, they were not Marine, and when you asked them, who are you, what are you, they couldn't and they wouldn't say. But I was glad they were there.
Okay. For one of our last questions, it would have your views on the war changed over time?
No, they have not. War is terrible, but I'm one of a very small minority who, when someone says, well, we lost the Vietnam War, did we really? I'm not sure we did, because we stopped communism there. Now, albeit South Vietnam fell to North Vietnam, but I can remember, and I was glued to the TV set when I saw North Vietnamese soldiers and Viet Cong guerrilla soldiers walking down the street in South Vietnam, and after they had captured the country, and within a matter of a couple of days there were tanks in the street. Where were those tanks? They couldn't get from North Vietnam in the amount of time when they showed themselves to when South Vietnam fell. Well, they were there all the time, hidden in the jungle. They came all the way from North Vietnam. But anyway, the North Vietnamese soldiers who were walking down the street, they were fighting because they said they are going to be there to free their South Vietnamese counterparts, free them from the imperialist pigs, us, to fight for their freedom so that they have things like enough to eat, roof over their head, safety, security, care for them health-wise. And these troops are walking down the street. And they're looking around and they're befuddled because they see grocery stores with food in them. They see shops. They see shopkeepers. They see people who are in virtually every way better off than they were, and that their families are in North Vietnam. And they say kind of to each other, I'm taking liberties here, but hey, what is this? We were duped. It's better here than it is in North Vietnam. We want some of this. We want this. This is what we want North Vietnam to be like. Now, we won virtually every battle that we were in. Not everyone, but we won the big majority of them. And there will be those people that say, yeah, but you lost the war. Did we really? Our goal was to stop communism. I think we did, to a large extent. The domino theory did not prove itself to happen. Today, Vietnam is reunified. You've got just one Vietnam. You don't have a North, you don't have a South. But Vietnam is one of the countries in that Pacific Rim area that wants to reestablish in like the biggest possible way a friendly working relationship with the United States. We've got those relations with a lot of those Pacific Rim countries already. And Vietnam is one of those countries that I don't think we can call them quite an ally, but we can't call them an enemy exactly anymore either. And communism as we knew it then does not exist there now.
Okay. Then just one question I want to ask really quick. What was your views on the president of the time, Richard Nixon?
Richard Nixon. I don't think he got very good information from the military leaders that were in Vietnam. As a country, as a military force, we had never been in anything like Vietnam, where we were fighting people by night, but by day they were our friends and villagers, the barber, whomever, as I mentioned. And our military leaders there that were on the ground did not understand that, just what kind of a war we were in. And they did not adequately communicate to President Nixon just what was going on because they didn't know. They gave him information, but it was incorrect. It was false. They may have even lied to President Nixon about what was happening. And when I say lied, I mean knowingly lied for the sake of perhaps their own military career. Nixon trusted his people on the ground. I think he was in over his head before he knew it. And, well, I don't know about that end of it. Nixon, of course, ended up resigning his presidency over Watergate scandal. But his whole time as president, I think, was so full of half-truths, total mistruths. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not a very political person. Not at all.
Okay. That sums up the entire interview, and I just want to thank you again for doing this for me and for my class, and
You're welcome.
then all off.